Here's my setup. I have a mini PC. It's a great little machine. It's quiet, it's cool, and it sips power, but it also has the graphical horsepower of an ROG Ally. And I have this, a 7900 XTX, a graphics card roughly the size of a small country that pulls way too much wattage. So the question for today is whether this, the Aoostar AG03, an eGPU dock that connects over a single cable, can actually bridge those two things. Whether you can take a tiny, low power computer and a giant, power hungry graphics card and bolt them together somehow into something that plays AAA games at 4K. The short answer, yes. And honestly, better than I expected. But there's a couple things that you need to know about before you buy one. So let's hop in. If you've never seen one of these before, an eGPU is basically like an external home for a desktop graphics card. You put a normal GPU inside it, you run a single cable to your computer, and suddenly your handheld or your mini PC has a real graphics card. The catch is your computer needs the right port, either USB 4, Thunderbolt, or Oculink, something with enough bandwidth to feed a GPU. My mini PC is a B-Link running an AMD H255 with 32 gigabytes of RAM. It has USB 4, which makes this whole experiment possible. I've actually been in the market for one of these ever since I sold my last one, so when Aoostar offered to send the AG03, I was genuinely interested. I reviewed the AG02 last year, and I really liked it. As always, the company hasn't seen this video. They have no input into what I say, and I'm just gonna give you my honest thoughts to what I think about it. And what I think starts with the unboxing, because there's always a couple things worth flagging. This was slightly more expensive than last year's model, though last year's wasn't bad on price either. This one runs at $259 US on their main website, or you can get this on Amazon.com for $279. Mine came through Amazon in Canada. You can import it, but you'll pay some import fees on top, which up here is pretty much par for the course. Inside you get a little diagram showing you how to connect everything, an instruction manual that, if I'm being generous, doesn't really tell you a lot, and a warranty card with customer service info. One thing the diagram wants you to do is to keep the GPU power cables coming straight out of the card, which is a little funny. Most power cables bend anyways, so I don't really think it's an issue if they bend a little bit. If you've got one of those 40 or 50 series NVIDIA cards with one of those high density power adapters, be very careful with the bend radius. Those connectors are famously fussy. And then of course, the actual reason we're here, the dock itself. The first thing you'll notice when picking it up is it's completely metal. Of course, you have a plastic top underneath the GPU, so it doesn't conduct any electricity. There's no flex, it's cold to the touch, which means yes, it definitely attracts fingerprints, but it feels genuinely solid. The locking bolt on the side that holds your GPU in place, also metal. On the front, you've got a power button that sticks out quite a bit, and it is genuinely hard to press. That sounds like a complaint, but the way I see it, it's actually the opposite. You're never gonna bump this and kill your dock mid-game. Next to it, there's an Oculink connection with two USB-C ports, one for your data connection. This has support for Thunderbolt 5. I don't have any devices running Thunderbolt 5, so I'm just gonna use USB 4, which is backwards compatible. The second one is a charging port. You can of course use this other cable too for charging the device as well. But I'll come back to whether this actually works later because the answer turned out to be far more interesting than I expected. There's some subtle branding on the front as well, and I'll be honest, it looks clean, professional. For a piece of gear that's gonna live on your desk, it doesn't look like a science experiment, which I really like. Now here's the part that actually sets this apart. The power supply. It's using an 800 watt server power supply, and it's platinum rated. so it's extremely efficient, and it's built to a much higher standard than no-name bricks that you expect on mini PCs. It's even removable. You press it down, flip a lever, and the whole power supply pulls straight out. I think that matters more than it sounds. With a normal eGPU, if the power supply dies, the whole unit is e-waste. With this, if it fails in 2 years, you swap it out for a standard server PSU and keep going. That is the kind of design decision that I can really appreciate. Up top, you've got your standard PCIe power and the PCI Express slot itself, which has metal reinforcement around it. Pretty important for when you're about to hang a very heavy card off the top of it, and I am definitely going to try that. I have a pretty heavy card. I'll get into that later. I'll note one tiny thing. There was a little bit of gunk on the top of the eGPU kit. I have no idea what it was, but I wiped it off. It didn't affect anything. So this is the test. A 7900 XTX, the XFX version, and it is enormous. I've seen this card pull upwards of 450 watts, which is already nudging the limit of what this dock is rated for. You don't get the full 800. I believe it caps out at around 500 for the PCIe cables. It needs 3 8-pin power connectors, which happens to be the exact maximum for this kit. In other words, I'm not easing this thing in gently. I'm throwing the hardest realistic card at it on day one. If the AG03 can tame this, it can tame just about anything you can sensibly pair with it, minus maybe a 5080 or a 5090. So let's build it. Installation is pretty straightforward, with a couple of moments worth narrating. The 3 8-pin cables it comes with are very stiff, and I'm not a real fan of the coating on them. When you bend it, it creases and it holds that crease. It's just heat shrink, so it's just cosmetic, but I'd be careful bending these too aggressively. The cable that connects the dock to your computer, on the other hand, is excellent. It's a Thunderbolt 5 cable, rated at 80 gigabits per second. The only downside is it's short, which is actually something that you want. Anything over 3 feet can cause connection issues with eGPUs. The kit also includes an anti-sag bracket with a soft rubber backing. The GPU rests on it so it doesn't droop over time, and you bolt the whole thing down. I'll admit, I got a little OCD here, and I genuinely considered grabbing a level to make sure it was sitting straight. Then it's just seating the card, and this is one of the most nerve-wracking parts. Pushing an expensive card into a slot, getting it at 90 degrees, locking the bolt. Take your time, eyeball it straight, and don't force it. A real tip from doing this, push the power connector closest to the slot in first. They're hard to push in, and it's even harder to push them in when the other ones are in the way. If you start from the far one, you'll be fighting the cable the whole time. And make sure each connector is fully seated with no gap. With the card sagging just a little bit, honestly, it's not too bad. I did tighten up the bracket a little bit, and it's good to go. The moment I plugged in the power supply, even before turning the dock on, I could hear the fan. It's not loud, but it is there. And when you press the power button on the front, the tone of the power supply changes entirely. There is some mild coil whine. Now, I don't like anything that's super loud sitting next to me, so my honest take after living with it, when the dock is just idling, you'll notice it in a quiet room. But the second you launch up a game, the GPU's own fans spin up and completely bury the dock's noise. Having this thing right beside me on a desk, I genuinely expected it to be obnoxious. It just sounds like a fan. The bigger issue is that the power supply has no on or off switch. I'll come back to that because it's my single biggest complaint, but the short version is put it on a power bar so you can actually cut off the power when you're done. So time for the part that matters. I plugged it into the mini PC, set up the FPS overlay so we can actually see what's happening, and I fired up Resident Evil Requiem. First thing on the main menu, 160 FPS, the card is running at 3 GHz, pulling a whopping 250 watts. Yes, that's the menu. That's a promising start. Then something interesting. In-game, my frame rate told me I was being held back, and the overlay told the entire story. CPU utilization was pinned at 100%. The GPU could do more, but the little H255 in this mini PC couldn't feed it fast enough. That's one of the eGPU realities that nobody tells you about. With a card this strong on a small machine, you'll often hit a CPU wall before you hit a GPU wall when you're using a powerful GPU like this. Here's the genuinely impressive part. I bumped it up to 4K to put more load onto the GPU, and I watched the utilization climb up to 96%. On the old AG03 eGPU kit that I reviewed, I was lucky to see about 80, at least from what I remember. This dock is pulling noticeably more out of the same class of card. Board power climbed all the way up to 360 watts. This little setup turns into a tiny space heater, which, fun fact, is exactly why I pulled this out of my editing rig in the first place. It was literally cooking my office. And through all of that, the dock stayed cool. I put my hand right on the front of the power supply, not hot at all. For something pushing this much wattage, pretty reassuring. There is one game that fought me. Forza stuttered. Frame time spikes all over the graph. And at one point, I was down to 35 FPS in a game that should just fly on this card. I tried everything, dropped the settings, killed VSync, killed motion blur, still spiking. So I went looking for why, and I learned a few things worth passing on. First, the USB 4 was running at PCIe by 4 3.0. Swapping the cables didn't change this. Second, and more importantly, resizable bar was disabled. That feature can cause exactly this kind of stuttering when it's off, and the catch is it can only be turned on at the BIOS level. I couldn't even get into the BIOS while booting from this eGPU. Every other game I tested was fine. Resident Evil, fine. Pragmata, perfect. The Alters, Crimson Desert. The only consistent problem child was Forza, so I'm fairly confident this is a Forza and AMD quirk, not a fault with the dock. It does run perfect on my other two PCs with a 4070 Ti Super and a 5070 Ti in my editing rig. If you're a NVIDIA user, you'll probably likely sidestep most of this entirely. But then I had an idea. What if the bottleneck wasn't the dock at all, but the port on my mini PC? So I unplugged it and connected it to a handheld instead, my Claw 8 AI Plus. Two things immediately stood out. One, it was detected instantly. No drivers, it just appeared. I was running the Starship dock from Neo in particular, so I already had the drivers installed, and it worked out of the box with them. And this is the interesting bit. Through the Claw's Thunderbolt port, the dock was running at PCIe by 4, 4.0, not the 3.0 that I was stuck on with the mini PC. The handheld was feeding the GPU better than my real computer was. And the games looked incredible. The defaults pushed most settings to cinematic, and it was running smooth. I genuinely couldn't believe a handheld was driving a 7900 XTX at these settings. No stuttering either. Butter smooth on Intel with that Thunderbolt port. You can overclock or undervolt the GPU, even though it's hooked up in an eGPU configuration. My recommendation for a hot card like this is to drop the power tuning by about 10%. Overall running cooler and quieter. The fact that you can do this through an eGPU was definitely news to me. Comparing it to what I've used before, this is a better experience than the AG02. And considerably better than something like the Neo Starship, which has a 7600M XT soldered in, a fixed mobile GPU that you can't change. The whole point of this thing is flexibility. You bring your own card. You can swap it in with whatever you want. Remember that second USB-C port? Well, it works. Across all that testing on my Claw, the Handheld's battery never dropped, and I never had to even use that second port. You can run this off a single cable, power and data both, which is exactly the clean setup that you'll want for a handheld on your desk. This also lands at a very interesting moment. x86 handhelds have gotten absurdly expensive. The Legion Go 2 in Canada is up to $2,300. The Legion Go S has nearly tripled in price at $2,000 Canadian. Meanwhile, mini PCs have gotten cheaper. So if you've already got a mini PC or a capable handheld, adding an eGPU kit and a reasonably priced GPU is starting to make a lot more sense than buying a whole new gaming machine right now. So what about what I don't like? Because nothing is perfect. By far the biggest one, the power supply has no on or off switch. Plug it in and it's always drawing power, always making a little noise until you physically pull out the cable. The easy fix is just to put it on a power bar and flip the bar off when you're done. But make sure to press the dock's power button first to shut it down cleanly before cutting the power. I just wish the switch on the kit actually shut off the power supply as well. The second thing isn't really much of a flaw so much as a limit you need to respect. This kit tops off at about 400 watts to the GPU. Now that's plenty for a 7900 XTX or any sensible card, but do not expect to slap a 5090 or even a 5080 into this. Those pull far too much wattage. I guess the way I see it is think of it like a dock for high-end cards, but not really flagship ones. And that's genuinely the whole list. Everything else about the build is solid. It's one beefy, well-made dock. So can I recommend the AG03? Absolutely. It's one of the best eGPU kits that I've used, and the new chipset uses USB 4 even more efficiently than the AG02. The reason I can recommend this so easily is you can put just whatever card you want in it. It handled the most demanding card that I own, better than its predecessor did. The build is genuinely premium. The anti-sag bracket and removable power supply show real thought, and it works well with both NVIDIA and AMD. They sent it over, let me take a look at it, and say whatever I wanted. I have no regrets. Is it expensive? Yeah, it is. But look at where hardware prices are right now. If you already own a mini PC or a handheld, buying one of these plus a good used GPU often makes far more sense. It's definitely not for everybody, but if it's for you, well, you already know. Honestly, the biggest limitation of a kit like this in today's economy isn't the dock at all. It's the GPU. Graphics cards are getting expensive and hard to find. But here's the good news, you don't need a top-of-the-line card for most of this. A used 7900 XTX, a 7700 XT, or even heck, an old 3060. There's a ton of value out there. Check eBay, find that budget card, and this kit gives it a second life. For the record, the only reason that I even have the 7900 XTX is that DaVinci Resolve runs better on NVIDIA. That and the heat. So my editing workflow basically forced me to upgrade, well, kind of side grade, which left me holding this absurd card with nowhere to put it. Now it lives in the eGPU kit in my bedroom as a small form factor gaming PC hooked up to my B-Link. That's the setup this thing was made for. If any of you need help finding a GPU or you've got some questions about eGPU bargain hunting, drop it in the comments. If you found something and want to know if it's a good price, let me know. But I care more about what you think. What's your take on the eGPU kit? Let me know in the comments below. As always, thanks for hanging out. I'll catch you in the next one.